Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and this is episode 83, recorded on August 6th, 2014. If you want to see all of my shows, go to my vid blog at walkinpark.com and see all the rest of the shows, as well as this one will be put up very soon. So this week we're going to do something unusual. We're going to a place that you might not ordinarily think of as a park, but it's actually a cemetery, and I guess some people call cemeteries memorial parks. But this place is environmentally oriented. It's sort of the final act of love of people to actually create a preserve out of the place where they are laid to rest. So this is called Greensprings Natural Cemetery Preserve. That's what it is, and it's in Newfield, New York, and in the southwest part of Tompkins County, not that far from Ithaca, but pretty well out in the boonies too. So we won't waste any more time on getting to that. I'll go right to my field visit to Greensprings.
Okay, so we have 100 acres.
Yeah, and it runs from down in that wood, way down, you can't quite see it, a hedgerow down there. Then that's a horse pasture over there. But then we're also on the other side of the road. We go all the way around to Newfield State Forest. So we're bordered by 4,000 acres of Newfield State Forest and 4,000 acres of Arnott Forest, which is owned by Cornell. And it's a lot of land.
That's good.
And it's an old farmhouse. It's an old farm, essentially, that was abandoned, and we ended up with it, which is why you see this mix of, it looks like old fields. Well, that's what it is.
Yeah. Right.
And it's so funny because when we first started thinking about this, we were thinking, wouldn't it be nice to have a really pristine piece of land? But what we're doing is restoring this to what perhaps it was, although on the way, for several years at least, I think we're going to be protecting meadow nesting birds. So we are managing this property for meadow nesting birds because they're taking it on the nose.
Yes.
All the woods have come back to the northeast, and many of the prairies, most of the prairies have been plowed, so those prairie nesting birds that sort of came east as people who were abandoning hilltop farms like this were going west where there's much better soil. There was a time lag. It wasn't like, we go west, birds come east. It was more, we go west, and then a few decades later, the birds are moving east. This is my unscientific impression of how it worked, but I think I've got the gist of it. So this is one of our first, it tells you where you are, and we've got everything surveyed, and you're in at one corner of a 90 by 90 surveyed site.
Okay.
And within each 90 by 90 block, you've got 36 possible grave sites. So you've got 15 by 15s.
Wow.
That's,
So how many total have you mapped out so far?
well over 1,000. And we've got room for several thousand more easily. Here's a burial mound where people are just letting it revert to the way the meadow was, because they're totally comfortable. This is somebody who was buried in winter. So it's a burial mound, and Many people just say, let's just let it go the way it was. Often you'll find headstones. This particular one doesn't have one. But that doesn't mean people won't put one there someday. They might, because we've sometimes seen people go 3 or 4 years as they're figuring out, how do I want this stone to look? What stone is it going to be? You know, really giving a lot of thought to the stones, because each stone is different. They're field stones. Often they come up as a grave is dug. So you've got an irregularly shaped stone, but a very lovely and appealing stone. And you can have 400 square inches, roughly. So how you measure an irregular stone, 400 square inches, but that's, you know, considerable. And they're all flush with the ground. You know, it's for her son. This is his own little place in the country forever. That's kind of what green burial is here. It's your own little place in the country forever.
So in this 15 by 10 foot, 15 by 15? 15 by 15 square foot lot, is his burial the only burial here? Or
Yeah,
will you
oh
have,
yeah.
but will others be allowed here? No.
Because we have a conservation mission, and we have a lot of land. And so we could charge somebody the same amount of money, but the site's already been bought.
Yep.
And we allow only one burial per site, because our mission isn't to pack as many people into Greensprings as we can.
Right.
Our mission is that someday we're going to be part of Billy Campbell's vision, where you've got all these green cemeteries that are part of the emerald necklace of all the other land trust lands, the conservation easements people put on their property, the state forest, the however you do it, to create habitat for a lot of animals and plants that are taking it on the nose.
So who's Billy Campbell?
Billy Campbell, there you go, thanks. Billy Campbell is the guy who began this whole thing in the late 90s.
The Green Burial
The
movement.
Green Burial Movement, and he's from Westminster, South Carolina. He's in the shadow of the Appalachians. He's 30 miles from where they filmed Deliverance, the movie Deliverance. And he's a fifth generation in his small town. And when his dad died and the family put a lot of money into that grave, he thought, because he was an active conservationist, he thought, you know, think of all the land you could save if you captured even 10% of the whole funeral and burial industry, the money that's spent on it each year, billions of dollars. Think of all the land you could save. So that's who Billy Campbell is, and it's his vision that really began the whole green burial movement in North America.
Well, he wanted to save some amount of...
He says, and this is a long shot, but he says, you know, I want to save 2 million acres in 20 years.
So how does green burial save land?
Well, this isn't going to get developed. If we get enough burials and we're able to put away enough money, I mean, that's all in the distant future, but hypothetically, if we're able to do that, then we can get another site. And then we can get another site beyond that. Or other people like Candace, who you want to start a green burial ground in the Berkshires.
Right. Massachusetts right now doesn't have a green burial cemetery,
Oh.
so I'm working with other volunteers to help create one, find one, and then create one. And we do have a pretty active group, but we're still looking for that piece of property.
So that's how you do it. That's how you save land. I mean, there are people all over the Midwest. There's people, a woman called me from Kansas and said, you know, I think I might be able, I've got this land that I think I might be able to do this. So there are people in Texas, there are people, Georgia, Florida, you know, the Southeast, because people really do sort of like the whole traditional aspect. And we believe that green burial, in a way, is a return to tradition.
Mm-hmm.
To the way that I would say my grandparents, because I'm a hick, so I'm confident my grandparents had that very simple, traditional. I would be shocked if they were embalmed. Maybe they were. Certainly my great-grandparents. This is the way, not exactly like this, but, the old style country cemeteries.
All right, so every cemetery has land. So if you got a cemetery and you're burying traditional burials, isn't that saving land?
If it's a traditional burial.
No, I mean, well, conventional, I should say.
Uh,
How's this different
if
from
you're
that?
mowing constantly, if you're using fertilizers, pesticides, whatever you're using, I mean, we know that a huge lawn is, in a lot of ways, I think it would be unfair to say it's a biological desert, but it's kind of close. What would you say?
So I have a different opinion just because I work for Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, and we now have a very sustainable landscape management program where limbs that come off of trees themselves, even in some cases the leaves that come off the ground, everything is mulched together.
Mm-hmm.
It's mixed with our interment fill so we can create a topsoil. We create topsoil that goes back on the grounds. We create topsoil that's good enough for our greenhouse growing medium. We also create a mulch that goes in some of our garden beds, as well as a compost. And the compost we also use to create compost teas. The compost teas are also being used as our fertilizer. So we don't use herbicides or other inorganic fertilizers on the ground. And we do that because it's also a wildlife habitat. So this is 175 acres on the edge of Cambridge as a burial ground and a sculpture garden. There are some beautiful, extraordinary monuments. So we don't use fieldstone monuments like we have here, which is also a whole different aesthetic.
Yeah.
But in Mount Auburn's case, it really was a vision of the founders to create the rural burial ground in 1831. And still today we're doing burials, but we're tucking them between the older burials that were originally this size of 15 by 20, 15 by 30.
Right.
So we're still doing burials, but not in the same fashion. And in some cases, many cases actually, we end up using concrete boxes that go into the ground. And that's what makes the traditional cemetery so different from a place like this, where there's no extra concrete going into the ground to store the coffin or as footings for a new monument. So this is a really special place because it's fully a conservation area and fully a wildlife habitat.
Right.
And Mount Auburn, by the way, I'm not sure there are that many. There's West Laurel in Philadelphia. There are other places from that very progressive movement that Mount Auburn sparked back in the early 1800s. And they very well might be doing things similarly to the way you are. But I would say you're almost a lone voice in the crowd, because most conventional cemeteries aren't doing that.
Right.
They're not creating wildlife habitat. They're not really, nourishing the soil.
So by having a cemetery, a green cemetery like this, you're acquiring land and ensuring it to be a preserve on one hand. That's very friendly to nature. And on the other hand, you're not using materials and that either use up a tremendous amount of natural resources that we have, or putting toxins and other noxious things into the environment.
Yeah, and with a conventional cemetery again. And this is simply how the culture evolved. And there's absolutely no shame or blame in being buried in a conventional cemetery or owning one or operating one. But here, for example, meadowlarks and bobolinks and goldfinches, you can't be mowing their nesting habitat. And in most cemeteries, it's kind of you have to mow,
Right.
because that's what people expect. So
Mm-hmm.
here they don't want that. They choose Greensprings because they don't want that. And we've sold over 700 sites, I think. I'm pretty sure we've had close to 200 burials. You've got your astroturf, you've got your plastic flowers, you've got the mechanical lowering device that's skirted so nobody can see the grave. When we dig a grave, we don't take any soil away, but we cover the entire burial mound with spruce boughs or whatever's green. We just beautify it with spruce boughs and flowers, and the grave itself has spruce boughs and flowers in it, and we have these treads along the side, and again we've got all this greenery that softens the look, and we don't need astroturf. We cover it with straw, we cover it with the spruce boughs that were on it.
What was that again, Mary, about planting shrubs and trees?
They have to be native. When we do allow people to plant low shrubs or native forbs, you know, your perennial flowers, your native grasses, that's fine. What we can't allow is trees because of the whole roots going into other burial zones and the difficulty that creates with digging a grave.
Right.
They didn't have mechanical lowering devices. They had human lowering devices. And we've seen over and over and over and over again at Greensprings just how transformative that is. We've had 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, 400 people, 500 people at a burial, and all kinds of weather. And when we've had funeral directors say to us, you know, we're going to need help with lowering the casket because this person has a heart condition, or it's going to be just the elderly parents there, or whatever. And people, and these are some long stories, and maybe we don't have time for them, but when people step up, when the 76-year-old father steps up, he wasn't going to be one of the pallbearers. He wasn't going to help lower the body into the grave, but he steps up because he wants to do it. And so we didn't need any volunteers for that burial. There was another one. They sent out the call for volunteers. I was there. Well, the guy with the heart condition steps up. This other person steps up. These people step up from the family because they want to be the one committing their beloved dead to the earth, and it's their final act of love.
Right.
And, you know, and I do see that conversations I've had with the executive director of the Cremation Association of North America have convinced me that they are really on to the whole mercury emissions issue. They really care about it. She told me their grandfather wanted a green burial, but he was in a place where it's 200 miles to the nearest one, so he chose cremation. But he wanted green burial. She is no problem at all with green burial. The Cremation Association of North America is really progressive, but on the other hand, when you're talking cremation, I mean, there are now services where if you live a couple hundred miles away, you just call somebody up on the internet. You just press a button, and they go get the body, they cremate it, and you get a box in the mail.
Right.
And how personal is that? It's not.
Right.
Whereas with green burial, it's so personal, which is why over and over we've seen it be so transformative. And here's this beautiful stone that this woman had carved for her son.
Okay.
So what's so amazing about this grave and why it means so much in all the stories that we've amassed about Greensprings, and there are a lot of incredible stories, but this guy, Freddie Gradle, so he's a waiter. I mean, we've had all kinds of people. We have had farmers, we've had accountants, we've had waiters, we've had common laborers, we've had everybody you could imagine. We've had indigents, but Fred loved nature, and all he wanted to do was be a waiter. people have said, the guy was brilliant. But he just wanted to be a waiter. He was a self-taught naturalist, and a few months before he had a brain aneurysm, he said, he saw an article about Greensprings and said, I want to be buried there. And I think he must also have said, because he was an organ donor, he must also at some point have said, they can't have my heart belongs in the land. Well, he died a few months later. And there's over 100 people here. He had been a mentor to students at the Statler Hotel at Cornell University. And so everybody's here weeping, saying goodbye to Fred. And his mom, who's in her 70s, tells me this story as she walked back up toward the cars, looking back and seeing this group of students sitting at the edge of the grave with their legs dangling in, saying goodbye to Freddie. When I talked with her, she said, they can have any organ they want, but my heart belongs in the land. And the Gradles have in this area somewhere between 7 and 9 family plots.
Wow.
Because Freddie Gradle meant so much to them. He meant so much to so many people. He was so loved. Wow, this is real recent that got in.
The headstone.
Yeah, it wasn't in. I did a tour 2 months ago.
So whose birth here?
Carl Leopold. His first name is Aldo. And if that means anything to people listening, it sure means something to you, Tony. But Aldo Leopold was one of the foremost conservationists of all time. He's in conservation circles, he's renowned and known and loved all over the world. And so many people have read and been deeply influenced by his book, A Sand County Almanac, which you gave to me, Tony, 40 years ago.
Oh, really?
And said, read this. So I read it. It's also got this section called The Land Ethic. And it was so powerful, so persuasive. I mean, he's there with Thoreau, with John Muir, he's one of the top 3. So Carl is his son. That's why he has the name Aldo Carl Leopold. Carl was our founding vice president. And I recruited him to the board. And I'm really glad I did. He was amazing. And the help that he gave, the incredible amount of, I'm fumbling for words here, but just his wisdom. Mm-hmm. And everything that he had already done as a conservationist in starting the Finger Lakes Land Trust, right, as founding president, through his work in plant physiology, making one of the major breakthrough discoveries that then permitted him to go into Central America and figure out a way to bring the forests back to denuded mountainsides where it was impossible. It would have been impossible otherwise because of the nature of the way seeds developed in those particular fruits and that they'd lost the mycorrhizal, this sort of fungal thing that trees like to do that help them grow. Yeah, and he discovered all that. He started a place called the Tropical Forestry Initiative, and his last startup, that was Greensprings.
Wow.
Yeah.
And here he is.
And here he is.
I remember Carl. Great man.
So you could say, save a forest, plant yourself, or any number of, it's a tagline, what can I say?
Save some land.
Save land. Yeah.
His heart is in the land.
There you go. Yeah. So it's echoing what Fred Gradle said 3 years before Carl died.
Yeah.
His heart is in the land. So yeah, we've certainly got your people who choose green burial because they just like the simplicity of it. And maybe it's a little less expensive. Dare say that at Greensprings it's less expensive. You've got people who choose green burial because it reflects deeply held values that go back millennia. So if you think of the Eastern Orthodox, the Jewish, the Muslim traditions where in death all are equal. Well, you don't have to be religious. If you value equality, you know in your heart that in death all are equal. And part of the beauty of green burial is, so you're not putting hundreds or thousands of dollars into the rosewood casket and the ebony inlay and the purple velvet coverlet and the honkin' big granite headstone, because what has it really bought you? In death all are equal. And then the third type of people is really kind of what we've been talking about here, the people like Carl, who I think would just love to think that something on his grave could provide those seed heads, could provide nourishment for birds, maybe during migration. We've got a lot of milkweed up on another part of our property leading to the Leopold Overlook. And again, the idea that that could nourish monarch butterflies on this multi-generational odyssey to overwintering sites in Central America. It's a stunning idea. So there are these different kinds of people from all walks of life, you know, the librarians, the accountants, the farmers, the waiters, the occasional professor, and nurses. We've had nurses. I don't know if we've had a doctor, but we've heard of nurses and teachers and babies. Every so often. So that's who wants it. And wow, what a way to go.
Okay. So Greensprings Natural Cemetery Preserve in Newfield, New York. So you may want to look into that and go to their website and so forth. Today is a somber day because it is the anniversary of the the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 6th on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, back in 1945. So I'm going to end with this cenotaph of the at Hiroshima Park, Memorial Park, that has the names of those hundreds of thousands of people that died so long ago, and hope that it never happens again. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you soon.